and welcome to Mark and Carrie. Hi, Mark. How are
Hello
you?
there. It seems that I found you in exactly the same place I left you last time.
Yeah, I just stayed here in like an amber mold. Yes.
Yes, I was using a GIF generator on my phone, and I don't know if you got the same one I have, but if you basically do, what is it, lockdown work schedule or something like this in a GIF generator, it's this great GIF of a stick figure sitting at a desk in front of a computer going like this,
Yeah.
turning around, going to a bed, lying down, and then just getting up and doing that endlessly.
I mean, that's what it feels like.
That's what it feels like.
Yeah. I saw somewhere someone said every day feels like Tuesday. I think that's kind of right because you're neither excited nor beaten down because it's Monday. You're just
No,
kind
absolutely,
of
absolutely. So we have a garden at the back of the house. And last year, at the end of the season, when all the sort of furniture for outdoors goes on sale, I managed to get a giant table. It's like 18 foot long or something like that. So we're considering doing socially distant hangouts
oh,
where
that's
we occupy different ends of the table from each other outdoors.
yeah. Oh no,
So
that's a really good idea.
so that'll either work or I'll be dead in 2 months. We'll
Yeah.
find out. This is it. And we can talk about, because that trade-off, the find out in 2 months or be dead in 2 months, this is where we're going nationally. But anyway, where do you want to get started in this week's review of awfulness?
Well, I also want to say something about Mark and I are friends as well, and Mark has this wonderful grill and fixes these awesome meals on it. So I was just thinking as you laid out that picture of like I've been dying for like a grilled whatever meal,
Yeah.
and especially Memorial Day weekend, typical time for grilling. So I was just imagining placing myself at one end of your patio furniture.
Well, tonight, actually, I'm not going to grill, oddly, even though it's a really nice night. I've been rummaging through the survivalist freezer, getting
Oh,
stuff out of the freezer that like needs to get out. And it tells you how long this has been in there because, of course, St. Patrick's Day was like almost pre-pandemic. So I
yeah.
found a hunk of roast beef, or not roast beef, corned beef.
Uh-huh.
I've defrosted it. So I'm going to do corned beef and then some grilled asparagus.
Oh, that's
And I'm going to stew the corned beef in a porcini mushroom stock because, of course, I
oh.
managed to get some dried porcini mushrooms in the mail. So this is kind of like high-end survivalism, like stuff that's out of the freezer with dried mushrooms,
Which bet you got it in the mail.
which I
Yeah.
got in the mail.
Yeah. So we'll do a sharp turn here to transition to
Yeah.
what to what's next. Um, well, I mean, more unemployment claims. People are able to actually, or more people are getting through those terrible through online experiences and phone calls. I think the nearest numbers that I saw were like 40 million unemployment claims in the U.S. I mean, the shape of the return, all of the stuff that we see on the headlines. I one wonders, and we've been musing about this, about the reopening and how that
Mhm.
will impact things. And obviously, our last podcast, I was much more skeptical of what this would do. But in reading since Georgia, I mean, and Texas, for example, and Florida have opened, there hasn't been, although I don't know there's been enough time, there hasn't been a huge spike in those states.
Right.
So potentially they're laying sort of the first data points for us.
It certainly is. I mean, hats off to our southern cousins for basically going their own way because what they're doing is a giant natural experiment in which epidemiological model is right. So either you have model number one, nobody's been exposed, and there's a long delay in the onset of the infection. And in 4 to 6 weeks' time, the sound you'll be listening to is Texas Health Service crashing to the ground, right? Or alternatively, it's much more widely spread than we think. There's many more asymptomatic carriers. So the denominator, if you will, of the numbers expands, the lethality goes down, and most of us get by, and this opening up basically spreads, the beginnings of herd immunity. Then we don't get clobbered in November, and then we can sort of like imagine a way out of this. I really hope the second one is right. It disturbs me that basically all the public health people that I know, whenever you tell them that story, they just look at you as if you're slightly off your head and go, no, sorry, that's not going to happen. But that's the bet that we're making. And I hope that that's right. Now, that pertains directly to the unemployment numbers. I mean, these are unbelievable in the sense of not being believable because it's incredible numbers. And we've never been this unemployed. I mean, it's astonishing. And we really don't know what's going to happen. So let's go with those two models, right? Let's assume that the kind of opening up and it works model work. The key thing is the behavioral response, right? How freaked out are you? Are you going to go back to a tiny little sushi place that's in a basement with 20 tables stuck together, even if things are going well?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. Which means that a lot of businesses like restaurants crammed into places, how are we going to do massage therapy? This is one of the ones I want to think about, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not a luxury. For many people, this is a medical necessity. Are you going to end up going to the doctor, basically like the dentist, where the dentist will now have full PPE? Will your massage person have full PPE, right?
Yeah.
Even in the best of circumstances, a lot of the jobs that Americans did on an hourly basis, that were paid hourly with very few protections, they might not be coming back. We just don't know yet. And then, we were talking about this earlier, we can get into this again if you want. Let's go from there to what happens to real estate. So let's say a third of all restaurants don't come back. Let's say that in some cities, restaurants are, let's say, 20% of all commercial real estate. So then all of those things fail. That means rents have to drop. In the long run, you can imagine a world in which you've got bigger area restaurants, and that helps, and then that's how we get through it. But that valley, is going to be rough getting through it. So yeah, I see those unemployment numbers, and I ignore the level of the stock market and I look at the level of unemployment, and I think that's what we need to pay attention to.
Well, I have two reactions to what you just said, and one is the president said yesterday, I think, that if there's a second wave, we're not shutting down again. So he's certainly moving towards the herd immunity point of view. And then the second would be around what the political ranklings are for the unemployment numbers, and that Congress is, well, the House at least has passed a rather ambitious bill to put money in people's pockets, and is gummed up with the Senate and the Senate Majority Leader. And I mean, part of this is because I try not to read the news too much because I want to cry after I read it. But you just kind of think DC is even more of a swamp and even more disconnected than usual from what is actually the suffering of individual people that are out there regular, you see them out there on the street, they're everyone that we know. And Congress just kind of seems to be totally removed from that reality in some way. And so it's hard for me to fathom exactly how it is that disconnect is happening when we can't get a bill passed, we can't get a third for unprecedented activity.
My cynical way of thinking about that bill is the following. It pays for the Republicans to play prudence even if they're not doing it. So the Democrats are rushing to spend again. We need a pause. We've already spent $3 trillion, et cetera, et cetera. So that plays to their advantage, right? More cynically, the Fed has basically agreed to buy any and all financial assets. The CARES Act effectively bailed out the companies that are their investments and are their constituents. And then as far as they're concerned, mission accomplished, move on, right? So, they don't see the need for it. Now, the need for it really comes in at the state and local level. Now, the federal government strategy is, we're not going to talk about this anymore. There's no more Dr. Fauci in the morning. We're done, right? And we're dumping it on the governors. If the governors do well, we'll claim credit. If they fail, we'll blame them. And their budgets are falling off a cliff to the point that they're cutting back basic Medicaid and stuff like this in order to actually maintain the spending on COVID while cutting higher education, which is the bizarre thing that is going on across the nation. So yeah, the focus becomes state and local funding, and they're going to have to bite that bullet. They're going to have to address this. So, that's where we are. Just one other thing on what you said made me think of this. The press coverage here is really odd in the following sense. There was a big story on the BBC News yesterday that featured live footage of a 5-mile-long food bank queue in upstate New York. I read about this morning in a newsletter that goes around from London. And apparently it was shocking, and it was, close to people were just cracking up and, real anger and all that stuff. Have you seen any of that?
No.
Right. So basically, the European media is basically able to go in and say, look, in upstate New York, things are falling apart, right? This is pretty serious. Meanwhile, here, total disconnect. No, we shouldn't be spending anymore. Everything's fine, right? That disconnect is profound, absolutely.
But so, because your point is right on. I mean, I did read the front page of the New York Times and the Washington Post this morning, and it was all about Trump's firing of inspector generals generally happens on Friday night at like between 9 and 11 o'clock. So what are we expecting tonight? What did President Trump do yesterday or early this morning? What did he tweet? I mean, all the political.
Trump,
Yes, exactly. And not
nothing else.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
One thing, as I was thinking about when you mentioned state and local, is we work at an institution of higher education, and they really seem to be on the front line of making some really important policy decisions in terms of reopening or not reopening for the fall. And I think Cambridge has decided to be online for the fall. NYU has said they're going to be some sort of hybrid. The Cal State system has said they're closed through the fall. And Brown has yet to make a decision. I don't know if Harvard has made a decision, but certainly more and bigger university systems are starting to make decisions. And it's been interesting to me to see, of course, the bipolarity in those decisions, but also that really is a signal, I think, to the states and the local cities where these universities are, sort of what does the terrain look like throughout the rest of the calendar year.
No, absolutely. And, the remarkable thing is, and I think we spoke about this before, that it's not just on the state level, it is very much on the local level. And if you're in a small state like Rhode Island, then you can have really effective coordination between business and government and so on and so forth. And people don't like the lockdown. I am not saying it's a good thing. Please end this tomorrow, right? I mean, Carrie, come on over, give me a hug, it'd be wonderful.
Yes.
But, we just can't just now, right? And I was driving around and I had NPR on in the car. My usual response is to switch it off immediately, but I kept it on. And it started off and it was the sort of the standard Trump presser. And then I got back in the car after doing something, and it was Gina Raimondo's press conference. And the contrast was astonishing. I mean, it's not to say, yeah, Gina, whatever, but just somebody who can actually communicate that this is a problem, here's what we're doing about it, here's what we're trying to do about it, here's where the problems remain, yeah, this is where we screwed up, this is where we're trying to get better, this is where we're learning lessons. And then you compare that to, what you get coming out of the White House. And then, the media wants clicks, the media wants eyeballs. What are you going to concentrate on? Day-to-day competence or fire and fury? So they go with the fire and fury every time.
Well, and I think you're exactly right. The governor, and I don't know that Andrew Cuomo has been spectacular. I think he's still kind of a, bull in a china shop and like all that kind of stuff. But your point is that there's been a consistent presence and a reasonable answer, and they answer all the questions that they're asked, and there isn't any of this. I think that has been the success for these governors. And the same, I mean, your point about Gina's press conferences is not like they're like especially thrilling, but she's consistent.
Yeah, there's no flash. No, there's no flash. It's just like, what? I mean, so I learned something, right? Why are care homes such a problem? It turns out it's because care homes are designed with shared bathroom facilities.
Oh.
That's it, right?
Yeah.
Very simple. Right, till 6 months ago, not even an issue, right?
Yeah.
Now, totally deadly. Right. So it's a bit like dorms, right? Dorms, you're sharing rooms, sharing bathrooms, all the rest of it. You don't want to get people on campus, you're going to have to retrofit all that stuff, which is going to cost a fortune, right?
Right.
So all that kind of stuff, right? And that's, thinking through problems like grown-ups, which is kind of a good thing, I guess. So let me ask you a question in terms of brilliant distractions of the moment. What's Obamagate?
Oh, well, thank you for that question. So the president, I think earlier in the week / 100 years ago, was asked, what is Obamagate, by a CBS News reporter? And he said, you know what it is. It's obvious what it is. So that's what I would say back to you, is that you know what it is. It's obvious. No one really knows what Obamagate is. It's a mix of the President Obama, as he's leaving the White House, bugged the Oval Office. There's the stuff, and I don't even think we want to go into the whole Michael Flynn case, but somehow he was trying to set Trump up for some fall by telling Trump to get rid of Michael Flynn, which none of this makes any sense, by the way.
Okay.
And so there's the bugging the Oval Office.
So I know nothing about this. So Obama actually authorized the bugging of his office after he vacated it. Is that right?
Yes, he bugged it to listen in on Trump. Yeah.
That's pretty, isn't that kind of pretty not normal?
Well, I don't think it's normal. There are the classic cases of Nixon and Johnson that tape themselves doing all this stuff.
Right. No. I can bug my own house, right? That's totally fine, right? When I sell the house and then leave and then put bugs in, right? I do actually have to say, what's up with that?
Yeah, no, it's a bit odd, but I just that Obama would be so would want to was so obsessed with Trump that he would want to know every single move that he would do. But obviously, it's Trump that's obsessed with Obama. I mean, I thought it was
I'm
interesting.
still stuck on the fact that he left the premises and then bugged it. I mean, that can't be right, can it?
Well, that's part of the theory, yeah.
Well, no part of no. I mean, forget partisanship here for a minute, right? Obama good, Trump bad,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's not normal that a departing president would bug his office so that who's listening? The FBI?
Oh, maybe Obama with his headset.
So
I,
this is this true or is this just a conspiracy theory?
it's total conspiracy theory.
Okay, so there's no evidence that he
No,
actually did this.
no, yes, yes.
Okay, I thought you was because I thought you were very casually saying, "Oh yeah, he bugged his office." I was like, "What?"
Oh yeah, no, sorry, I should have started there. That there's no evidence for this at all.
Ah, okay,
Yeah,
got
that
it.
is
Right.
totally spun out of the mind of him, out of the current president.
So I was thinking, it's the obvious one, of course, is Watergate. All gates
Yeah,
come from Watergate, right? So in Watergate, there's a campaign to re-elect the president. They did very naughty things. They got caught on tape doing naughty things. That's Watergate, right? Now in Obamagate, then, so the argument is that Obama tapes Trump doing stuff that he hasn't done, according to Trump, and that makes it naughty. Is that it?
yes, that's right. That's
Okay,
right.
good. I'm
But
glad.
then to later be used, maybe. I mean, I don't think it ever went this far in President Trump's mind, but maybe to be used against Trump as part of another conspiracy that they'd been talking about pandemic. So Obama created a pandemic
Oh,
that would then
okay.
hurt the
Okay.
president, something like that, or to be used in Joe Biden's campaign,
I
something.
can't wait to see what so they're going to just they're going to make Joe Biden Chinese, a Chinese agent actually. That
I
seems
think
to
that's
be the
exactly
playbook,
right.
right? So
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for the one where they really just lose the plot completely and say that Biden traveled to China under the control of Xi and brought home a virus. Um,
Like with mushrooms, like in his porcini mushroom
In
package.
his porcini mushroom package, exactly. That's how it all
Oh God,
started.
like that's got to be coming though. That's somehow even scarier. But I just wanted to. There's one thing that I wanted to wrap up on the Obamagate is that on one hand you want President Obama to show up before Congress and testify. I don't know against what, but against something, because you can just see him like just slicing and dicing the questioners.
Yes,
Obviously, this would never happen, and all sorts of different things. But on one hand, you just kind of have that dream in your head of like let's just do this and let's see
right.
what this trial looks like against all of this.
You're on trial for something, and we all know what it is, but we're not going to tell you what it is because you know what it is.
So obvious.
It's sort of like Kafka does Watergate.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, are you a cockroach or not?
Exactly. So,
Um,
so speaking of, I'm not doing that as a segue. I'm not going to go speaking of that. But apparently, the Republicans are doing well in California.
yeah, so there was a special election in California for a Democrat that had to step down, and a Republican won that seat that had not been won for several cycles. And so, as political pundits, including myself, or close political observers, you want to read everything into every tiny little piece of election that you get. And so, part of this is, or part of the takeaway was, of course, maybe the Democrats aren't going to be on some huge tidal wave. I think it's Memorial Day weekend. We have no clue what's going. I mean, to your point, St. Patrick's Day. I mean, we were still kind of naive and
Totally.
thinking the world was normal. So I don't know that there's a whole lot to take away from it, except that a Republican took a democratically held seat in California, one you would think would be
Right.
fairly easily won. All the polls, to just take this to the presidential election for a second, show that Biden is up in the battleground states by pretty big numbers, some close to double digits. But all of this stuff is just fluff. I mean,
It's just noise at this point. It's just noise. I
yeah,
mean, so one of the snarky little comments I saw circulating around was that Biden has regained and is holding a very big league with over 65s who don't like the idea of like opening up and letting it rip because they're most likely to die.
yeah,
However, since they're most likely to die, they're likely to have the least effect on the forthcoming election if they're already dead. So at this point, like nobody, again, we're back to nobody knows anything at this
yeah.
point in time. The one thing that is just truly remarkable, though, that the Europeans just can't get their head around is that Trump, it's not that Trump can do no wrong. It's just, it doesn't matter what he does. It doesn't shake his support numbers. Have
It
you ever seen,
doesn't.
as somebody who studies American politics, have you ever seen anything like this?
No, you don't, because even at the end, Nixon, right? I mean, he leaves and hit I mean, whatever the base was. I mean, in 1968 or 1972 is much different than this base, but this base loves Obamagate. This base loves the firing of these inspector generals. This base loves the people showing up in Lansing, Michigan with their, give me liberty or give me death stuff. And so you just get this sense that, I mean, we talk about polarization all the time. It's not just polarization. This is just a real sense of total frustration with the system. Mm-hmm. And that it's not I think the stereotype of Americans are couch potatoes and we don't know anything about civic education and blah, which I think a part of that is true, is that everyone is just so disenchanted. Like I've showed up to vote and I get the same stuff no matter whether it's a Republican or Democrat. This goes back to, what we've been talking about, to burn the system down. And I'm just tired of it. So why bother to show up? It doesn't matter whose name is on the ballot. I'm going to get the same return. So in that way, I think his base is even more riled up, because I think they feel like they are getting something different and they are getting some sort of different response.
Or if he fails, what we're going back to is a kind of status quo ante, which they still hate.
Yes.
Right.
And you get Chris Christie, you get Nikki Haley, and they're just kind of these robotic figures.
Right. And there's absolutely no way back for people who are now well beyond the pale for that base. So, for example, think about Mitt Romney. Right. So, I mean, Mitt Romney was the candidate not that long ago. Now he can't even find a place in that party.
That's exactly right. I mean, he's not invited to the literal Republican
Literally,
party.
You're not allowed to come to the party of the party. Yeah. It's really gone. It's quite different.
Yeah. Well, what's happening on your side of the world in Europe? There's a lot of. I saw one of the headlines from the Financial Times was the creation of the France and Germany created a multi-billion-dollar fund. But the distribution of it, I mean,
So I've been working on a kind of a joke to try and explain this, and a lot of commentators in Europe are getting their knickers in a twist about whether this is a Hamiltonian moment or not, right? And what they mean by this was Alexander Hamilton, when he basically built the first bank in the United States, or the second, whichever one it was, assumed the debts of the states onto its balance sheet. They did debt mutualization, right, which is forbidden by Article 125 of the Treaty of the European Union. So basically, the EU institutions, the Commission, is going to issue its own debt up to the tune of $1 billion and a half. I can't even remember the number. It's got to be $1.5 trillion.
I think it's almost $1 trillion. It was
it's almost $1 trillion. Yeah, the numbers keep varying, but basically, it's a chunk of change. It's at least $500 billion, right? And that's great, and it's going to be used to give relief to COVID-affected economies and then promote green investment. And then it turns into the usual Euro fudge of it's going to cure cancer and it's going to be great for daisies and everything, right? Everybody gets a bit of everything. Now, this can go two ways. Either this is actually the first time that you see a Eurobond. This is a genuine new instrument. It's not produced by the nation states themselves. It's sold in third markets. It gives budgetary relief. That's the Hamiltonian moment. Or alternatively, it's the Hamiltonian moment in this sense, that there's an unexpectedly successful musical that everybody gets totally enraptured with for 6 months and then gets totally bored of because it's really not that important, right? I think it could actually be the other one. That's our European Hamiltonian moment. Because already what's happening is the so-called frugal four, who are the Germans, the Dutch, the Swedes, and occasionally the Balts, sometimes the Poles, add in who you want, are already talking about, well, maybe we should do this as credits. Maybe we should do this less grants, more credits, right? And then, of course, if you start seeing COVID-affected economies, well, there's a moving target. Because just now it's Italy and Spain, and they've been absolutely hit. But, 6 months from now, it might be Greece. None of this money is going to be available till 2021. Who knows who's the most COVID-affected economy? It could be the Germans. They could end up issuing it and getting most of it back. So I'm tending towards, this is Hamilton the musical rather than Hamilton the national bank model of what's going on in Europe.
I mean, there's rift between North and South, as usual. But is there a rift between East and West? Just thinking about the Eastern countries.
It's really East versus South in the sense that the Eastern European economies, and again, we don't really know why this is the case, and it's begun to change, but in the early part of the crisis, they were completely bypassed. I think it was Latvia basically had no cases, none, right? And that's begun to change. I mean, particularly because they've got Russia next door, which is now a total disaster. Hey, heads up, if you want to totally destroy your economy, why not have a strongman leader who doesn't listen to advice, who sidelines public health officials, and basically tells everyone it's all bullshit? because that's Bolsonaro and Putin and Trump. So there you go. Anyway, sidebar. Where were we?
Latvia.
Latvia, that's it, right. And also Romania were getting their cases from going to Germany to pick asparagus and then bringing it home.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's begun to shift and normalize a bit more. But essentially, even early in the last crisis, the Eastern countries are basically tied in as supply chain countries to the Germans.
Yeah.
The Germans make money through wage suppression and building BMWs and then selling them to the rest of the world, and the Eastern Europeans supply the parts. The Dutch do a bit of the financing, right? So that's the growth model. And Europe doesn't really fit into that. Southern Europe doesn't really fit into that. The Italians haven't grown in 20 years. They've got an enormous pile of debt. They're getting more. They're never going to pay it back. So the Eastern and Northern European ones know that this is a huge, to use bankers' language, contingent liability on their balance sheets. In other words, it's a bomb that could go off. So Hamilton moment, big version, this is the thin end of the wedge. They're really going to deal with this. They're going to have Eurobonds. Then it'll take a while to get there. And if they do, it's really important because you're giving the global economy an alternate safe asset to the dollar. Like this could be geostrategically important.
Oh, interesting.
However, the chances of that actually coming off, I then go back to Hamilton the musical, right, is actually vanishingly small because most of these things they've done before. There was this Juncker plan for investment. And it's all basically financial smoke and mirrors. It's kind of like big headline numbers, and then when you dig into it, it's all levered finance, and it all goes to the Germans and the French anyway. So, you know, what's new? So we'll need to wait and see.
That's interesting because I wondered. I was like, so they're setting it up. I mean, there's got to be some incentive for them to set it. They're not doing this as a charity. So what's the financial incentive for them to set it up, or political incentive as well? But
yeah. There's one other thing that happened. The German Constitutional Court came out and last week or the week before and said that the ECB can't continue to basically buy whatever it wants and do whatever it wants because its actions aren't proportionate. And basically this has made Merkel poop her pants because ultimately what's keeping the Italians on the road is ECB intervention. And if you start throwing the German constitution and basic law at the ECB and say you can't do that, and then the Bundesbank isn't allowed to take part in these operations, then you're bringing that train wreck of Italian debt ever further forward. So one interpretation is that the Karlsruhe decision has forced Merkel to be much more pro-European, pro-Eurobonds, big Hamilton, than she otherwise would be. All of these interpretations are plausible. We don't know just now. We will know in a few months.
I was also thinking about the nationalistic strains in all of this, and then obviously thinking about the general COVID response of German. Were they sending stuff to Italy? Were they not sending stuff to Italy? I mean, doesn't this all kind of fit in terms of more nationalistic feelings, more populist like leaders like Bolsonaro? You mentioned. I mean, Putin's been in his bunker. Bolsonaro's been doing these huge rallies. You don't know, like, Trump wants to do with the big rallies.
And he will do. And guarantee he will do.
Oh, yes. But I guess the question I had in my own mind and then wanted to talk through with you is will we start to see countries turn more inward in response and say, well, we don't want, I mean, we'll maybe help people or we'll help other countries, maybe in Latin America, this will happen more,
right,
or South America, but we really have to focus on ourselves because we're screwed.
I think that this is one of the positive sides of the EU. The EU has basically said no EU country on its own is going to get a virus at scale. And the notion that any European economy, if it does invent it, is going to patent it and sell it to everybody else after they've treated everyone else in their own country, just not going to happen. So they are actually taking a much more cooperative approach to it. As for the United States, China, everybody else, it's basically national responses. And, all this stuff goes back to, are we deglobalizing? Are we becoming more nationalist? And the answer is yes. I mean, we are. But I was on a call the other week and somebody made the following point. It's really hard to do some stuff. Now, let's say, for example, you want to bring pharmaceuticals back home. Let's say it's not even drugs. Let's say it's like simple things like cotton buds, right? To build a factory to the required specifications to make cotton buds, the licensing and everything else that you need to do for this, and like the tech and the building and the whole lot, it costs a fortune and takes forever. It's not easy to do this. It's so much easier to keep letting China make them because that's where all the plant and equipment is. Right. So, if you want to have like $1 a cotton bud for a while, yeah, you can do it, but it's really expensive and it's not clear that we're going to do this. And so much of this is just the weaponized bullshit of politicians, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, what's the cause for America's high number? China, rinse and repeat, right? So what's real and what's nonsense?
Well, and there's so many interesting articles that came out about why can't we, to your point about why can't we have, why aren't there more masks at the very beginning of things? And that was, well, we sent everything to other places. And this is why it's so hard to then get that stuff out of them. But I mean, you know, the relationship, I shouldn't worry about the U.S. and China because it'll be fine. You know, like I guess, my parents have been married for 60 years. I'm assuming it's like that, you know, your ups or downs, but you're still together and you rely on each other. And I'm not quite sure why I did that to my parents, but anyway.
I get it. I mean, yeah.
I mean, your point about the weaponization, I think is exactly what President Trump is going to do to candidate Biden, and it's just going to be China the whole time. And you just hope that, you know, on the other side of this, in January of next year, that Xi Jinping isn't like, you know what, I'm just tired of your crap, and, you know, no more Q-tips for you.
Yeah, exactly. That'll be the least of your problems, Q-tips. I mean, I'll give you one example of this. So they opened up production of the Volvo production plant in the United States, which I think is in Jersey, right?
Yes, I saw that.
And you had to shut it down. And then they shut it down because of COVID. They shut it down because they don't have the parts they need. Yeah. And they can't get the parts they need, right? Things are incredibly interdependent. It's very hard to de-link this stuff. Even in the United States with NAFTA, right? The reason that NAFTA basically got beat up by Trump and then emerged exactly the same with a few bells and whistles is because I think it's something in the order of 70% of the parts that are for cars assembled in the United States are either made in Canada or Mexico, right? You know, just breaking all that and bringing it home would rank up these companies. Well, so it's just...
To your point, it's just not living in the real world that we can suddenly just like do all this stuff. Well, tomorrow we'll just start this thing.
Yeah, I mean, it took 20 years to move all that stuff out.
Exactly.
Why do you think it's going to take you 3 months to get it back?
Yeah. On a slightly different note, but similar on a car manufacturing, I didn't realize Elon Musk was like such a total jerk. So he opened up his plant in California as part of this, like, give me liberty or give me freedom.
Give me profits or give me death. That was the
exactly. And I didn't
God
realize.
God forbid he has to lose any money.
Yes, what a total, total.
He also, apparently he likes a good conspiracy theory as well. And now there's a movie for everyone to watch. So have you seen Plandemic?
No, I haven't.
Well, neither have I. I was hoping you were going to talk to me about it.
I have not seen, but I did see Parasite. I think these are different movies.
They are definitely different movies. No, I do like the idea. There's something that's funny. I mean, Americans in particular have always loved conspiracy theories in a way that no other country does, right? And, you know, it's this notion of like the deep state is, you know, where it all begins in a sense, right? Now, the weird thing about conspiracy theories is it assumes a level of Machiavellian brilliance.
Yes.
Right? I mean, the people who organize this have been planning it for years. No word has ever got out. Anybody who, you know, steps out of line disappears out of a plane or something like this. Blah, blah, blah. Everything's flawlessly executed, right? You know, incredibly dangerous and unpredictable things like pathogens are made and weaponized so that we all end up driving Priuses or whatever the goal is, right? And at the same time, if you ask the same people, do you think the government is competent? They'll be like, you gotta be kidding me, they're a bunch of bozos, right? And it's like, well, hang on a minute. Didn't you just say that they're, yes, okay, but they're a bunch of bozos at the same time? Yeah, of course. And you're like, okay, that really just doesn't do it. I mean, like, but nobody seems to join those two halves together very often.
It's such a good, like, you're so sophisticated to put a scheme into place 30 years in the past.
Yeah, right.
Like, you can't get grandma her Social Security check.
No, never mind grandma. I mean, basically, you know, the fact that all of Florida's benefit system collapses overnight is proof of the conspiracy for the efficiency of government, right? You're like, oh, no. Some things just don't go together. What else have we got?
Well, I just, on this point about the two, holding these two different thoughts in your head. So this is from last week, John Oliver did this really funny segment on it, so I want to give him credit. But Axl Rose and Steve Mnuchin on Twitter, there was, so Axl Rose posted something about Live and Let Die from the Arizona factory. And Steve Mnuchin then wrote back something like, well, what have you done for your country lately? And then he put the American flag, but actually it was the Liberian flag. And so then Axl Rose like tweeted back something about like the GDP of Liberia. It was actually a very sophisticated response. And I just kind of thought, Oh, Axl Rose, man, you have some really great responses and showing our Secretary of the Treasury that was, the wrong emoji to use.
Yes, definitely the wrong emoji
Yeah,
to use. Although it could be the case that, like, once he's asset stripped the entire economy for him and his friends, we might have the GDP of Liberia. Maybe there was a kind of Freudian slip in there that
that is
we
a
weren't
great
actually
point.
afraid of. That
That,
could be it.
that is a really, really good point. And also one last thread from last week too. A lot of people were wondering who was the toilet flusher from the Supreme Court.
Yes, I've been up all week worrying about that
I
since you
could
brought
tell
it up.
the exhaustion look of exhaustion on your face. And a lot of people made a good point. Like the lawyers would never do this. They're not like relaxed and like just hanging out. So it's going to be one of the justices.
Yeah.
And a lot of court watchers thought, because Justice Breyer often gets up during when it's live and we'll go back and forth, that it was him. And you just kind of thought for a second, like, you know what? He's a man of a certain age, and he just doesn't. He's got job security. It's all good with him.
Actually, given that his name's Briars, I always have this picture of him basically getting up, going sitting in the toilet with a big tub of ice cream.
Yes, maybe that's.
And just walk, sort of like, God, I can't stand that Thomas. I've had enough of his crap. Ice cream. Then he goes back and passes judgment on the weighty things of the day. So exactly. I'm going to leave us with one last thing. And it's our other favorite couple, not Axl Rose and the Treasury Secretary. It is, of course, Meghan and Harry.
Oh, please.
Now, they're in California, right? They've went from Vancouver to California. That means they're going to have, he at least is going to have to get a driver's license, which means basically there's no proxy for this. You have to go stand in line with everybody else, right?
That's why I wondered, yeah.
So that's going to be awesome because, if you want to go hang with Harry, just hang out at the DMV. Eventually he's going to show up.
Like in Santa Monica. Wait, can you drive on both sides of the road? I'm assuming you can.
Yes, I can. So can anyone. It's actually not difficult. You just follow what everybody else is doing.
But do you also drive a manual transmission? Well,
I don't here. I can. I learned on one, yes.
Because that's just using totally different parts of your, because it's all. So anyway, my point was, I wonder if Harry is going to have to learn now how to drive on the right side of the road.
Yeah, but it's dead easy here. I mean, basically, you've got an automatic car, so you don't have to do anything with your feet. This thing called a clutch, just in case people don't know. And then, the driving test here, I remember, I did a New York driver's test when I first got here. And the British driver's test is unbelievable. Everybody fails about 3 times. You have to, you do it. Same in Germany. You do a huge amount of homework. You have to get it's a real written test. It's like 70 questions, right? Whoa. You have to get a really high percentage. And then the driving test is shit like in a manual car doing a reverse hill start. And if you don't hold your hands exactly the right way all the way through and check your mirror at certain points, you fail. Here, literally, somebody got beside me and said, like, go park over there, drive around the block, you're done. It's like I think Harry's got this one covered. I think he didn't drive tanks or something at one point, so I'm sure he'll be fine.
I was mostly curious about can you just send a proxy, and then also the 2, British driving, American driving. One other thing to put on our radar for next time is Supreme Court cases. So the big ones will be decided by the time we next talk. And there's some interesting stuff having to do with the president, but also big social issues as well. But we should be hearing about those decisions, I think, in the next couple of weeks.
In that case, then, in 2 weeks' time, we will discuss weighty matters of state.
Yes, and not just, Prince Harry getting a driver's license. So that is important.
Oh, that is important as well.
Yes.
All right. Until next time.
Sounds good. Thank you all for listening. See you next time.